Good morning and welcome to Sportuccino. We are live. It is Thursday and we've got a fantastic show for you this morning. We're on facebook.com/Sportuccino. You can join the conversation at Sportuccino on Twitter, and you can also listen back to this show on iTunes. There's a lot going on in the world of sport, so let's begin the show with our morning headlines. Tyson Fury vacates his WBO and WBA world titles to focus on his medical treatment and recovery. Fury had admitted to using cocaine to battle depression. England beat Bangladesh by 4 wickets to seal the one-day series in Chittagong. Tony Martin wins a record-equalling 4th time trial title at the Road Cycling World Championships in Doha. And Rafael Nadal gets knocked out in the second round of the Shanghai Masters by Victor Troitsky. Well, we'd love for you to get involved in the conversation. Please put your comments below. One of the things we're going to talk about today are some of the funniest things that relatives say to you while watching football matches. You know, for example, I was watching the England game the other day and Gareth Southgate came on the screen and my mum said, "Oh, is that a hairy Prince William?" Things like that, silly little things that a relative says. Maybe it's the relative who doesn't normally watch a football match, or anything related to sport as well would be great. Those funny little things that they say. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below or on @Sportuccino on Twitter. Well, today's show is brought to you by Barclays Eagle Labs. Barclays Eagle Labs provide co-working spaces and private offices for businesses to create, innovate and to grow. If you'd like to know more about them, all you've got to do is go on the internet and go to labs.uk.barclays, and you can also follow them on Twitter at @eagle_labs. So that is today's sponsor. It is Barclays Eagle Labs. You can find them on the internet, labs.uk.barclays. If you would like to be involved on the show as a sponsor, all you've got to do is send us an email, sportsdesk@sportuccino.com. Now, in those headlines, one of the things that was mentioned was Rafael Nadal. His season continues to get worse, being knocked out in just the second round of the Shanghai Masters, losing to Victor Troitsky, and he hasn't won a major Grand Slam title since 2014. So that is what we're discussing on today's poll on our Twitter page. Let's have a look at the poll. It is, will Rafael Nadal win another Grand Slam title? Simple yes or no answer. You know, he was so dominant at the French Open, wasn't able to win it this year, hasn't won for a long, long time. Been such a great player, had those legendary matches with Roger Federer at Wimbledon, hasn't won that in a while either. So will we ever see him win again? He's had injury troubles. Is he past it? What do you think? Give your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. So that poll one more time is, will Rafael Nadal win another Grand Slam title? We'd love to hear from you. Now, yesterday's poll was all related to do with England. England obviously drew 0-0 with Slovenia on Tuesday night in their World Cup qualifier. Unable to score, unable to win a World Cup qualifier for the first time in 14 matches. But was up front the real problem? Rooney was dropped. So we wanted to know in yesterday's poll who you think England should play up front. Should it be Kane? Should it be Vardy? Should it be Daniel Sturridge? Or should it be Marcus Rashford? And 41% of you felt it should be the young Manchester United striker Marcus Rashford. Ahead of Kane, ahead of Vardy, ahead of Daniel Sturridge. It was actually Daniel Sturridge who started on Tuesday for England. All of you think that Marcus Rashford should be given a go. Well, as well as Sportuccino, I also host a podcast called The Best in the World with Richard Parr. Every Wednesday, we bring out a new interview with a former Olympic champion, world record holder, or world number one, to find out what they do differently from the average Joe, from me and you, what makes them the very best at what they do. We try to find out those 1% gains that they get to win that gold medal. This week I spoke to Mahe Drysdale, and he was telling us his amazing story of when he won the Olympic gold medal at London 2012.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
I'm not someone that suffers from nerves a lot, but I was incredibly nervous. This meant so much to me because I knew what a gold medal would do for my career. Effectively, in my mind, my career would be a failure without an Olympic gold medal. That's the pinnacle of our sport. So, I knew how important that was. It's a real pressure situation. You've got a 7-minute race, effectively to define your career.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard.
Great chat there with Mahe. You can listen to the full interview on iTunes on The Best in the World with Richard Parr. All you've got to do is go to richardparr.net/iTunes. Now, there are fun moments in that conversation, but very often these are very serious, driven people. So sometimes it can be quite driven, but that's great if you want to get better at what you do. Well, we like to do all kinds of different things because this is a morning breakfast show. We're live, we have all kinds of fun. We talk about the serious bits of sport, but we also talk about the funny bits of sport. So I thought I would get one of the best comedians in the business, Stephen Grant, live on this morning show to chat all things sport and comedy. Stephen, welcome to Sportuccino. It's great to have you on the show.
Hi, Richard.
So, Stephen, Brighton and Hove Albion fan, you run a podcast, but I hear that whenever you've gone this season, it's not gone too well for the Albion.
I'll be honest with you, we've had, as an Albion fan, we've had some, well, they've all been dramatic seasons. We've not really had a humdrum one. We've either been sort of challenging near the top for playoffs or even automatic, or we've been fighting against relegation. And, this was the first season that I felt before we kicked off, because of the quality of the people who've come down from the Premier League, that we would have a much tougher job of being there or thereabouts at the top. So I actually thought that this season would be one where we weren't going to really be sort of challenging, but it looks like we are. And a lot of people are saying this is actually one of the best teams we've had in years. Real change for Brighton. They've not tried to they haven't accepted bids for their best players. They fought them off. It's caused a little bit more sort of squad, if you like, sort of unhappiness for people who wanted to move on. But it means we've kept the core of a strong team. However, whenever I've gone to see them, I haven't seen that. I've seen it being a bit duff, to be honest with you. But we definitely have got a quality squad this year.
Yeah, I think it was crucial for us to keep Dale Stephens in the end, Stephen.
Yeah, that's right. He's a great player, but it's really unheard of in the history of Brighton, certainly the last 10, 15 years, that a player would say, look, I want to go to somewhere higher up, and in this case, the Premier League. And virtually always in the past, Brighton would always basically acquiesce and let that person move. And I could see why they did that. Firstly, because of squad harmony. And secondly, because you don't want to put off players signing for the club if you think that in the future the club is going to hold back on their ambitions. If you're kind of an ambitious young player and you're looking for a team to sign for in the Championship, would you go to the one that's going to make it difficult for you to move to the Premier League if that club doesn't make it there? So it's what we call an interesting poker move here, because we've given ourselves a better squad for this year, but maybe we made it hard for ourselves in the future.
You may have heard me mention at the top of the show that one of the things we're discussing are some of the funniest things that relatives say while watching football. We'll get back to Brighton in just a moment, but I just want to read some of the comments we've got here on Twitter from Rick Waters here. He says one of many is his girlfriend said when he saw Rooney and Vardy sat together on the bench, his girlfriend said, "That's the ugliest bench I've ever seen. Do you think that if they had a love child, that his potato face and his pointy face might morph to look normal?"
Wow.
And then a response of, "Why don't you talk to me when you're watching football?"
I hope she's not watching the show, because I don't feel I'm looking my best today. So that's That's frightening. That's a bit of a kicking, isn't it? I'm sure the new Mrs. Vardy totally agrees, and Colleen is almost clapping in agreement. No, yeah, that's harsh. I remember my dad watching World Cups when I was a kid. It's next to him, and he doesn't really watch football. So, like, most lay football fans, he'd only ever watch World Cups.
Yeah.
And he couldn't understand why, in order to keep possession, they would kick the ball backwards. So he'd sit there like this, and he'd have his head in his hands. He'd just go, "Why are they kicking the ball backwards? The goal's the other way." And he would say it for 90 minutes.
Oh.
And I remember at the time thinking, it's a bit funny saying that. If you said that now, straight into a nursing home.
Well, I was watching the game was on ITV on Tuesday night, and they just keep the same colours for the teams for the clock in the top left. So it was like a red background and then white inside.
Yeah,
so
red and white, but there's a little strip of colour just to the left of it and to the right of it. But what was weird was that England is written in white, the other one was written in red, but then the other one team was right and he said the other way round, wasn't it, on the previous game, on the Malta game?
Yeah, and that really confused my mum because I think Slovenia weren't even playing in red or white, whatever colour they were playing. She was like, so which team is which? And I'm like, well, England are normally white or red. And you always get those kind of comments.
Well, I tell you what, I was in the Middle East once watching a football on a television channel, and it was like from a league. I can't remember which league it was. It was like a Saudi Arabian league, and at half time they used the cameras from the other side of the pitch. So in both halves of the game, from a football viewer, they were kicking left to right. One team.
That's confusing.
Absolutely blew my mind.
It's like a 90-minute first half or something. That'd be
yeah.
so...
Do you know what? Whenever you watch football, televised football from other countries where it's their top league, but it's not very well followed, and definitely the case in the Middle East where it's so difficult to be outdoors because it's so hot. So even though the leagues are quite popular, everybody watches on television, and it's great because you can always see the fact that the stadium is half built, or there's like the shops around the back, and then it's like even in Britain when you've got like some grounds like Craven Cottage, where you can see that because it's in London, there are flats behind where people on the balconies can see the game, and you always see people stood there watching the game. On these ones, you've got passers-by and people just walking around who could be watching the football for free but aren't, and they just walk past. Now I sit there and think, I'm sat on television watching something that you could watch for free, and you're just walking past. What are you doing?
Yeah, it's crazy. I remember they used to have those houses looking over the Goldstone ground for Brighton and Hove Albion, which people could watch for free. Let's talk a bit more about Brighton again for just a moment. They're doing a feasibility study into fans standing watching games. What are your thoughts on this? Do you prefer to sit or do you prefer to stand? How do you like to watch your football?
I like, well, you know what? I like to do both, and that's the biggest problem. I like to sit for most of it because I'm a 43-year-old man and I stand up for a living, and so it's nice when I do my leisure activity that I sit down. But I like to stand up when something exciting is happening because you're just full of adrenaline and that's what you want to do. And it's a bit weird, isn't it? Because all-seater stadiums, they don't want you to stand up. But of course, in terraces, you can't ever sit down. And, I've got a little boy who I want to start taking to games when he gets a little bit older, and I can't see him being able to stand up. And he won't be able to see because the people in front of him stood up. So I'd have to hold him. And the old idea of holding a 5-year-old for 90 minutes, it sounds like purgatory, to be honest with you. So I think it's a brilliant idea, but I think it's going to be specific stands, specific areas. But they're also saying that it won't be like terraces of old, like where everyone's sort of bundling in and just trying to squeeze them all in because of safety implications. So I can see where they're going to have allocated standing, and you're not going to have quite the same atmosphere as you did when you were trying to cram in as many as possible, which of course would never happen again because of the safety implications. So I think it's a good idea, but I think these people have got this romanticised idea that it's going to be like the terraces of old are in for a bit of a shock.
Yeah, I wonder if it'll be like a drawn section on the floor, like a little box or something, and it's got your number, like row X, standing position 5.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, because of course people would ignore that. So I'm wondering if they're going to sort of slightly enforce it by having effectively curbstones, sort of like little ridges in between each bit where you stand, to make it difficult for people to stand other than where you're supposed to. And then it's going to look like, well, I don't know what it will look like. I guess it will look like in middle school when you were choosing people to play on your side and everyone sort of stands equally along in a big row or something. I don't know. But I'm not sure how they're going to enforce it. I mean, they'll enforce it by virtue of the number of people coming in, but then you'll have everyone sort of like cramming to the front. But who knows? I think it's good for fans. I think if you can do it, they should do it. But I imagine if you work at a stadium, if you're marshalling or something like that, it's going to be a nightmare because they're probably through safety going to have to stop people cramming together, and good luck enforcing that.
There's nothing worse than being picked last in that playground, being picked for that team.
Oh no, there's worse than last. I'm sure everybody remembers this. The person who was so bad they were a liability, and then both captains argue over who gets that person, as in they don't want them. And then that's when you were playing when you were 11 and there was a referee, and that's because somebody wanted to play football that neither team wanted so much. They said you can be the referee.
Yeah,
that's harsh.
That's really harsh. I've got another comment here about the funny things that relatives say, and one here is: so Nicolas Anelka plays for Chelsea and France too. What happens when they play each other? Always a classic. You always get those type of ones. Are there any classic matches that you remember that you've been to that you've really enjoyed?
It's really weird, isn't it? Maybe it's my comic side, but I tend to remember the matches where it was hopeless, because it sticks in my head why I would do that I would have some free time and I'd go and watch something that was terrible and think, why have I taken my time out of my day, money, said to my family, I can't see you, I'm going to go and watch the football, and it's been awful. I remember one of Poyet's first games in charge of Brighton, where we played against Leeds, and we were at home at the old Withdean, and we lost 3-0. But we did well to keep it to just 3 goals. And of course, Leeds bring a lot of fans with them, even though the Withdean was possibly the worst away ground in the world.
Oh, yeah.
Because the away fans had to sit not just away from the pitch, but behind a running track and behind the nets and the sand pits for the long jump and the hammer and the javelin. I mean, they were so far away that I remember when Brighton played Man City in the penalty shootout, the away fans didn't know when they'd scored a goal because they were playing in the other goal. I mean, it was that they were so far away.
Yeah.
And the rain just kept hammering down, and I was in what was then the north side of the stadium, which had a cover on it, but I was at the front of it, so I was getting soaked. But as Brighton got progressively worse, people kept leaving earlier and earlier and earlier, so I kept moving further and further seats back until eventually I was in the back row and finally not being rained on. But by then I was already soaked. Brighton were falling to pieces, and there was possibly about a quarter of the crowd left. And I remember thinking, I just don't know how I'm going to explain to my other half how this was a fun day out, because she was going, why do you go? You don't enjoy it? I'm going, no, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's the camaraderie, and just thinking there was nothing enjoyable about the entire day. But I still went back, so obviously it was fun.
Yeah, I took my girlfriend to her first football match the other day at Brighton, and they won 2-0. And it was one of those things where when you love football so much, you want the experience to be so good because you've sold it going, oh, it's great, it's an amazing stadium, but they're playing really well. And then you're really hoping that they actually do well and it's actually an enjoyable experience. And, very often it just comes down to whether they win or lose.
I know. Well, yes, and that's the thing is, I mean, I remember when I think it was Brighton were playing Walsall, something like that. I can't remember. I think it might have been Walsall, and the other team were down to 9 men, not 10, 9, and we lost 1-0.
Oh.
And we were playing against 9 men for the majority of the game, and we couldn't score against them. And I remember looking around. After a while, you stop watching the football, even though you're at the football, and you start looking at other people in the crowd.
Yeah.
And about half the people were looking through their fingers. It was just that. It was just like, this is, it was as if the opposing team went, look, we can't make it any easier for you. Why can't you score? And it was, miserable. But yeah, I mean, the playoff final at Cardiff, I remember that great. I remember as much the special train they laid on that went from Hove all the way to Cardiff. It's sort of like a seaside special train, because that was part of the camaraderie. Being on a train entirely full of Albion fans there and back when you've won the playoff final. But that was an incredible day.
Yeah, 2004 when they won the playoff finals. I was studying for my final exams at university. I had one more exam to go, and I'd got a relative to buy me the tickets. And when I turned up at the gate, they said, the stub of the ticket's not there, you might not be allowed in. And,
oh dear.
and I'm thinking, I've travelled up from Southampton, I might not even get to see the game, I might not pass my exams, what am I doing here? And fortunately, they took pity on me, and they let me in, and Albion won. And so, yeah, again, one of those really memorable days. We've nearly run out of time, Stephen, but one of our top stories today is obviously Tyson Fury giving up his world title belts in boxing and the WBA, WBO. You know, he made all those comments after he won the title, and then people were like, you shouldn't be involved in BBC Sports Personality of the Year. Now he's admitted to using cocaine. It's just the story and the tale just continues. What's been your thoughts on everything which has been going on with him?
Well, I mean, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because he's clearly a troubled bloke. But there is an element of boxing that requires, well, not say requires, but attracts outsiders of norms, outsiders of society. And the good thing about boxing, and I say this as someone who has to argue this with their friends all the time, is it gives people who want to have an outlet for those drives a sort of actually quite a comparatively safe and healthy environment in which to do it. You might be thinking, what the hell's safe and healthy about being punched by somebody else? But think about what the alternatives are for people who don't feel like they're part of society in that respect. So I actually feel quite sorry for the guy. But at the same time, you know, if you've got a footballer or an athlete, it's not difficult for them to have media training because that's different to their trade. You know, it's outside of their sporting world. But in the world of boxing, you kind of almost need to have a little bit of outsider, I'll do this all on my own, I'm going to be my own man status, because you're fighting on your own. And you know, I actually feel a little bit sorry for him, but realistically, if he said or did any of those things in any other sport, you wouldn't expect him to continue. And boxing probably can't give itself a unique set of rules. It probably needs to have the same set of rules as all other major sports. So what I'd like Tyson Fury to do is to take 6 months out, sort himself out, realise that the thing that actually kept him sort of sane and happy was boxing, and come back to that clean, and then hopefully there'll be a happy end to this story. But the reality is, in boxing, there's a lot more unhappy endings than there are happy endings, and I've got a sneaky feeling Tyson's is going to be one of those.
Yeah, well, hopefully it will be a happy ending. His fight against Klitschko was a real sporting highlight of mine last year. I thought it was absolutely fantastic the way he won in Germany, which very few people can do, beating Klitschko, and then we've got the Joshua fight potentially coming up. Stephen, thank you so much for your thoughts on that.
And I don't think Nadal's going to win again, by the way. I don't. I watch lots and lots and lots of tennis, and he can with Djokovic in the form he's in. Bearing in mind Djokovic is about a year younger as well. Djokovic is only rubbish in Olympic years. Read into that what you will. And that means the next chance for winning the French Open will be 2020, at which point Rafael Nadal will be 36. And I don't think he'll have wrists or knuckles or ankles that will allow him to do it. So that's it as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, that's it. Well, I've actually got a question here on the Facebook page to do with tennis. Did you see the behaviour of Nick Kyrgios yesterday?
I hadn't seen him yesterday, but I watch him loads. I think he's brilliant for the sport. Absolutely amazing. More Nick Kyrgios is, as far as I'm concerned. The fact that Murray, who's quite a judicious judge of character, likes the guy is a really ringing endorsement for me. I think he's great. What did he do?
Well, he pretty much gave up the match by doing the, you know, when you're no good at doing serves and you just toss the ball up and you just kind of pancake it forward. He started doing that.
Yeah, I've seen Nick Kyrgios do that before, actually. When he was up against one of the French players, I think it might have been Tsonga. And he was trying to return to his serves, just looking sideways, not looking on, and just basically doing that, just basically thwacking the ball downwards and missing it. And the crowd were booing. And then he just said, "Well, why don't you come down here and see how you cope with one of his serves?" But yeah, no, he gets into his little head tunnels. But people hate it. The problem with it in tennis is you've got to be seen to be trying now because of all of the betting scandals. So with Kyrgios, he's in real trouble of actually getting banned from the game because it's now part of the rules.
Yeah, well, Stephen, we've run out of time. Just before we
All
go,
right.
maybe give us a bit of information how we can continue to follow what you're up to and any of the performances you've got coming up and where else we can, continue to learn from you.
www.stephengrant.com, Stephen spelt with a PH, and then you can follow us on Twitter at Stephen C. Grant. Just search for Stephen Grant and you should find it. And it'd be great to see some new followers on there and come along to my shows.
Brilliant. Stephen, thank you so much for your time this morning. Stephen Grant, comedian and Brighton and Hove Albion fan. Thank you so much.
That's right.
Great to have Stephen on the show. I've seen him at the Comedia in Brighton. He was absolutely fantastic. Well, we've nearly ran out of time on the show, so a few of the other things we had planned we're going to not do today, we'll end up doing tomorrow. If you've got any thoughts on any of the top stories on sport, let us know on Twitter, let us know on Facebook. Let's have a quick reminder of today's poll. It is, will Rafael Nadal win another Grand Slam title? Stephen Grant says no, we just heard from him. He doesn't think that's going to happen. What do you think? Will Rafael Nadal win another Grand Slam title? We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget, this show is on Facebook Live right now. We are live every single morning at 8 a.m. British Standard Time. We're also on YouTube and we're also on iTunes. I want to remind you that today's show is brought to you by Barclays Eagle Labs. Barclays Eagle Labs provide co-working spaces and private offices for businesses to create, innovate and to grow. Their website is labs.uk.barclays and their social media Twitter page is at @eagle_labs. Thanks to them for sponsoring. If you'd like to sponsor, just go to sportsdesk@sportuccino.com. Just before we go, let's have one more look at this morning's sports headlines. Tyson Fury vacates his WBO and WBA world titles to focus on his medical treatment and recovery. Fury had admitted to using cocaine to battle depression. England beat Bangladesh by 4 wickets to seal the one-day series in Chittagong. Tony Martin wins a record-equalling 4th time trial title at the Road Cycling World Championships in Doha. And Rafael Nadal gets knocked out in the second round of the Shanghai Masters by Viktor Troicki. Well, that's it. Another Sportuccino done and dusted. If you like the show, please share it with your friends on Facebook. Please like the page. The more people that watch, the more involvement we have in the show and a better show for all of us involved in Sportuccino. Thank you so much for your time this morning. If you've got any comments, put it in the Facebook page, put it on the Twitter page. We have loved to hear from you. We will be back tomorrow morning from 8 o'clock with Simon Watts. He has just done a brand new documentary on footballers trying to find new clubs. Really interesting. That'll be live at 8 a.m. on Facebook. Simon Watts live on Sportuccino. Thank you so much this morning. We'll be back tomorrow at 8 a.m.